Hello everyone. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Florentina Iordache and I will spend a few minutes with you. I want to let you know that the author that we have chosen is Edgar Allan Poe, and we made this decision because this writer has been and actually is one of the most famous and important authors in the last centuries. He is considered the father of the terror literature. We are aware that Edgar Allan Poe's prominence as a significant figure in world literature is largely due to his brilliant and profound short stories, poems, and critical theories, which establish a remarkably influential justification for the short form in poetry and fiction. Poe is credited with creating the modern short story and is the primary proponent of the art for art's sake movement created in the 19th century's European literature. He is also referred to as the father of the modern short story in literary histories and encyclopedias. Whereas earlier, critics predominantly concerned themselves with moral or ideological generalities, Poe focused his criticism on the specific style and construction that contribute to a work's effectiveness or failure. In his own work, he showed both a masterful command of language and technique and a unique and imaginative creativity. Poe had a significant impact on the French symbolists of the late 19th centuries who changed the course of modern literature. Poe's short stories and poetry rank among his best-known creations.
Hello, my name is Alberto García, and I'm going to read the second point of this activity. I'm going to introduce Edgar Allan Poe briefly and I'm going to say something about his life and death. Despite being known as the creator of terror literature, Edgar Allan Poe also produced work of investigation, essays, poetry, and prose. His main themes were madness, losing control of the mind, being in an oppressive environment, and losing the woman in your life. The surrounding environment plays a big role in shaping a person and creating one's personality. Edgar Allan Poe, an American writer, is an excellent example of this. Allan Poe was born in the United States in 1889 and died in 1849. Look at that, he was only 40 years old. I'm going to talk now about his parents. His biological father abandoned him and his mother passed away the same year from tuberculosis when he was only 3 years old. Imagine how catastrophic and sad it was. But every cloud has a silver lining. He was adopted by a rich family, which gave him the opportunity to get a good education. Allan Poe was taken in by John and Frances Allen, though they never really legally adopted him. With a life full of obstacles, he needed to bear the sadness of his parents' death and face financial problems all by himself. But still, Poe managed to live a successful life by himself. He holds fame in the ring of the American Gothic genre, digs out people's darkest sides and puts them into words, and, without himself knowing, as a boy, Poe attended the best school available and was admitted to the University of Virginia at Charlottesville in 1825. While there, he distinguished himself academically, but was forced to leave after less than a year because of bad debts and inadequate financial support. After that, he had several problems with addiction, like gambling and alcohol, which led him to live a poor life. Edgar Allan Poe's family's background includes two blood siblings, elder brother William Henry Leonard Poe and younger sister Rosalie Poe. William was born on the 30th of January in 1807 in Boston, Massachusetts. He, however, grew up in Baltimore with his paternal grandparents after the demise of his parents. Henry initially spent several years working as a sailor. He later quit sailing in 1827 and subsequently embarked on a second career as a writer of poems and short histories. Even though Henry never reached the Olympian age of his younger brother, he still manages to publish several works, including Dreams, The Pirates, and Original Lies of a Pocket Book. Henry Poe later died of tuberculosis on the 1st of August in 1831. He was just 24 years old. The last member of Edgar Allan Poe's birth family is the younger sister, Rosalie Mackenzie Poe. She was born in December in 1810 and was said to have been mentally retarded. Following the death of both parents, Rosalie was adopted by a Virginian couple known as William and Jane Scott Mackenzie. Edgar Allan Poe was married just once in his lifetime, and that marriage was to his cousin, Virginia Alicia Clemm. Virginia was born on the 15th of August in 1822 in Baltimore, Maryland. Her father was Poe's paternal uncle, William Clemm Jr., while her mother's name was Maria. Poe first met his future wife when he joined their household in 1833. They fell for each other along the way and applied for a marriage license in September in 1835. The two were later wed by a Presbyterian minister on the 16th of May in 1836. Poe was 27 years old at the time, while Virginia was only 13, though her age was listed as 21. Accounts of the couple's marriage vary. Some sources state that Poe was an affectionate husband, while some others state that he carried on some improper association to the extent that Virginia accused him of murdering her while she lay on her deathbed. Whichever it was, the couple remained together until Virginia died of tuberculosis on the 30th of January in 1847. Poe's marriage to Virginia did not produce any kids. His other relationships, after her demise, did not also yield any offspring. On the 3rd of October, a passerby noticed Poe slumped near an Irish pub in Baltimore, Maryland. When Poe's friend, Joseph Snodgrass, arrived, he found the 40-year-old writer in what he assumed was a highly drunken state, wearing cheap, ill-fitting clothes that were very different from his usual mode of dress. Taken to Washington College Hospital, Poe slipped in and out of consciousness. He died early on the morning of 7th of October, reportedly uttering the last word, "Lord, help me, my poor soul." Poe left behind a mystery, and after his death, that has persisted for more than a century. No death certificate seems to have been filed, and a local newspaper reported Poe's cause of death as a congestion of the brain, supposed to be an euphemism for alcohol poisoning. Shortly after his death, Rufus Griswold, Poe's literary rival, wrote an obituary characterizing him as a morally bankrupt, drunken womanizer. As Griswold also wrote the first biography of Poe, his biased portrait formed to the basis of Poe's image in the public mind, though later scholars conclude that Griswold's version of Poe's debauchery was highly exaggerated. The mysterious circumstances surrounding his death have led many to speculate about the true cause of Poe's demise. Here are the top 9 theories. The first one was beating. In 1867, one of the first theories to deviate from either premises of alcohol was published by biographer Wallace Smith in her article, saying that he was robbed and beaten by ruffians and left insensible in the street all night. The second one is about coping, a method of voter fraud practiced by gangs in the 19th century where an unsuspecting victim would be kidnapped, disguised and forced to vote for a specific candidate multiple times under multiple disguised identities. Voter fraud was extremely common in Baltimore around the mid-18th, On the polling site where Walker found the disabled Poe was an unknown place, the Cooper brought their victims. The fact that Poe was found delirious on election day then is not coincidence. Another one is alcohol. Those around Poe during his final days seem convinced that the author did, in death, fall into that temptation, drinking himself to death. Another option is carbon monoxide poisoning. In 1999, public health researchers Alberto García argued that Poe's death was a result of carbon monoxide poisoning from coal gas that was used for indoor lighting during the 19th century. Another one is heavy metal poisoning. According to centers, Poe's mercury levels were most likely elevated as a result of cholera epidemic he had been exposed to in July in 1849, while in Philadelphia. Poe's doctor prescribed calomel or mercury chloride. Mercury poisoning, centers say, could help explain some of the Poe's hallucination and delirium before his death. However, the level of mercury found in Poe's hair, even at their highest, are still 30 times below the level consistent with mercury poisoning. Another option is rabies. In 1996, Michael Benita was participating in a clinical pathology conference where doctors are given patients, along with a list of symptoms, and instructed to diagnose and compare with other doctors as well as the written record. The symptoms of the anonymous patient EP, a writer from Richmond, were clear. EP had succumbed to rabies. Another option could be a brain tumor. One of the more recent theories about Poe's death suggests that the author succumbed to a brain tumor, which influenced his behavior before his death. Another could be flu. A far less sinister theory suggests that Poe merely succumbed to flu, which might have turned into deadly pneumonia on his deathbed. As centers explained, in the days leading up to Poe's departure from Richmond, the author visited a physician complaining of illness. And the last one is about murder. In his 2000 book, Midnight Ready, The Mysterious Death of Edgar Allan Poe, author John Evangelist was presented yet another theory about Poe's death, that Poe was murdered by the brothers of his wealthy fiancée, Elmira Shelton.
Hi, my name is Luis Punzón and I'm going to read the third point of this activity. I will talk about the importance of Edgar Allan Poe and his work. In addition, I will read a poem. The importance of this short story writer is that he is the pioneer in the terror genre as well as having several contributions to other genres. His works are characterized by the rich variety, meaning and significance of the stories, and of course, they have had enormous influence on other writers around the world. Allan Poe played a key role in adapting the traditional Gothic tale of terror into contemporary short stories and romantic tales. As we said before, the modern detective story, Gothic horror, and science fiction all have roots in Edgar Allan Poe, who is also criticized by creating them. Poe's literary criticisms, which put great stress on the correctness of language, measure, and structure, and the importance to achieve a unity of mood or effect, shape literary theory. Poe's peculiar duality stands out as his most distinctive quality. The stark contrast in the opinions held today about the man almost seems to suggest that he is actually composed of two distinct personalities. Now, I'm going to try to list the most famous plays on his career. So, ordered chronologically. First one, The Fall of the House of Usher, 1839, drama. Second, The Murders in the Rue Morgue, 1841, crime. The Gold Bag, 1843. This one is the third short story. The Purloined Leather, 1844. is like detective fiction. The fifth, The Raven, one of the most famous poems, 1845. Next one, The Cask of Amontillado, 1846, horror short story. The Bells is a poem, but this poem was published after his death in 1849. And the last one, Annabel Lee, his last poem. The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe is one of the most well-known poems ever written. It brought its author worldwide fame and has frequently been analyzed, performed, and parodied. But what about this poem makes it so special? The Raven poem, written by Edgar Allan Poe and published in 1845, it consists of 18 stanzas and a total of 108 lines. The Raven is a poem about a man who is heartbroken over the recent death of his beloved Lenore, as he passes a lonely December night in his room, and Raven taps many times on the door and then the window. The man first thinks the noise is caused by a late night visitor coming to disturb him, and he is surprised to find the Raven when he opens the window shutter. After being let in, the Raven flees to and lands on a bust of Pallas, an ancient Greek goddess of wisdom. The man is amused by how serious the Raven looks, and he begins talking to the Raven. However, the bird can only reply by croaking, "Never the moon." The man reflects aloud that the bird will leave him soon, as all the people he cared about have left him. When the Raven replies, "Nevermore," the man takes it as bird agreeing with him, although it's unclear if the Raven actually understands what the man is saying or is just speaking the one word it knows. As the man continues to converse with the bird, he slowly loses his grip on reality. He moves his chair directly in front of the Raven and asks his despairing questions, including whether he and Lenore will be reunited in heaven. Now, instead of being merely amused by the bird, he takes the Raven's repeat, "Nevermore," response as a sign that all his dark thoughts are true. He eventually grows angry, and the Raven calling it a devil and a thing of evil. The poem ends with the Raven still sitting on the bust of Pallas and the narrator, seemingly defeated by his grief and madness, declaring that his soul should be lifted nevermore. McGann, university professor, and John Stewart Bryan, professor of literature, say nevermore and evermore, which Poe also used in the poem, capture the writer's most important idea about poetry as more full and never-ending remembrance. Allan Poe, of repeats them, emphasizes the importance of memory because life consists of continuous loss. Poe used evermore because loss will always be part of life, nevermore because we can never hold on to what we have or who we love, is that McGann said. Now I'm going to read a poem by Edgar Allan Poe. This one is called Alone, and it was published in 1875. So the poem says, "From childhood's hour I have not been, as others were, I have not seen. As others saw, I could not bring my passions from a common spring. From the same source I have not taken, my sorrow I could not awaken. My heart to joy and the same tone, and all I loved alone. Then, in my childhood, in the dawn of a much stormy life was drawn. For every depth of God and ill, the mystery which blinds me still, from the torrent on the fountain, from the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that round me rolled in its autumn tint of gold, from the lightning in the sky as it passed me flying by, from the thunder and the storm, and the good that took the form, when the rest of heaven was blue of a demon in my view. Thank you. Poe wrote this poem like autograph album of Lucy Holmes, well known later like Lucy Holmes Barnstone. The poem was never printed during Poe's lifetime. It was first published by A.L. Didier in Scrimmage Monthly of September of 1875 in the form of a facsimile. The facsimiles, however, included the addition of a title and date not on the original manuscript. That title was Alone, which has remained. Doubts about its authenticity, in part inspired by the manipulation, have since been calmed. The poem is now seen as one of Poe's most revealing works.
Well, on this fourth part of our podcast, we're going to speak about history, culture, and society in the past. Poe is clearly a product of his time, which in terms of literature is called the Romantic era. The Romantic movement was one which began in Germany, moved through all Europe and Russia, and almost changed the entire course of American literature. Poe's brand of romanticism was akin to his contemporaries, but most of his work often bordered on what was later called the Gothic genre. The following discussion is not a comprehensive view of romantic concept, but instead it is indeed as a basic guide and explanation for some of the conventions or some of the devices often found in Poe's stories. Perhaps the most dominant characteristic of the Romantic movement was the rejection of the rational and the intellectual in favor of the intuitive and the emotional. In his critical theories, and though his art, Poe emphasized the didactic and the intellectual element had no place in art. Usually, in a romantic story, the setting is in some obscure or unknown place, or else it is set at some distant time in the past. The purpose for this is so that no one of Poe's readers will be hurted by references to contemporary ideas. Poe created new worlds so that his readers will concentrate wholly on the themes or atmospheres with which he infused his stories. Poe believed that the highest art exists in a realm that was different from this world, and in order to create this realm, vagueness and indefiniteness were necessary to alienate the realm from the everyday world and to thrust him towards the ideal and the beautiful. Sadly, our podcast arrives to its end, but before finishing, we want to let you know Edgar Allan Poe's legacy. As you know, from all the little things that we took in consideration in this small podcast, Edgar Allan Poe mastered the melancholic and macabre, invented the detective story, and he was pioneer of science fiction. So I think that has a lot of merit. As we said before, he had a huge influence, and other creative writers such as Thomas Howley Charvers or Margaret Fuller. Part of this influence came from his theory of the short story. He said that the author should construct a tale to fit one overall purpose or effect. He also believed his role as a critic included exposing poor writing and demanding that American writers meet higher standards. He believed that a work should be reviewed for his own worth and that non-literary criteria, like a writer's social status, should be irrelevant. Today, Poe is celebrated for his distinctive writing style and pioneering approach to poetry and short stories. Though he lived and worked in the United States, his overview is well known throughout the world. In fact, he is particularly renowned in France thanks to an extensive translation effort by the 19th century poet Charles Baudelaire. Of course, Poe is also popular in the United States after carving out a career as respected critic and living entirely off his earnings as a poet and an author. He is known today as the country's first professional writer. Yeah. To Poe, however, it was not a dream of professional success that inspired him to write. It was his love for the practice. With me, poetry has been not a purpose, but a passion. He wrote in 1845, and the passion should be held in reverence. They cannot at will be excited, with an eye to the paltry compensation of the paltrier commendation of mankind. And with all this information, all those ideas and little information that we recover from internet and all over the books, we hope you enjoy your time with us. Thank you very much to Alberto and thank you very much to Luis for being part of this group. And that's all for today, lads. Everything that we can say, it's said, and I hope you had a great time.